My name's Sundy, and I'm co-hosting this with Lorna. And this is the third of a series of conversations, panel discussions between us four around abuse. The first one we did was called, and the second one was called.
The problems of it with abuse, and the second
Yes,
one was the effects.
yeah, thank you. The problems and the effects. And this one is thriving beyond abuse. I think I put after as the title, but actually it's thriving beyond abuse. And before we get started, I'd love to invite us all to introduce ourselves, who we are, where we are, what we love to do, what we bring to the world. It's wild, wonderful women with wisdom worth sharing, which is one of the phrases that's associated with the Silver Tent, and our fearless leader, Francesca Cassini, who set this Silver Tent group up a number of years ago. So yeah, so Lorna, would you like to kick us off with introductions?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my name is Lorna, and I live in the Scottish Highlands. In our first series, I introduced myself as a holistic therapist. It's changed. So I am now moving on to being an online coach and helping individuals. I suppose this comes into this topic, so I'll maybe come back round to that about thriving beyond it, because it merges in with this topic rather than saying what it is right now. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Lorna.
Okay.
Lucy?
Hi, yeah, my name's Lucy. I am living in Greece for the last 20 years, and I have many strings to my bow. I'm an artist. I'm a past life regression therapist, florist practitioner, animal communicator, explorer, etc., etc. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? That's what you want to know right now.
Thanks, Lucy, love. Janet?
Hi, yes. Okay, I'm sat in wild, wet and windy Wales in the UK, not far from Cardiff, and back in my homeland after living for quite a few years of the last couple of decades in America, where I qualified as a life and leadership coach, and that's been my latest career. I love the work that I do, and I love that I'm actually working with women who are empowering themselves to come out of abusive relationships right now. And it's great to see what can be done with them. And I'm really excited to be here with all you ladies.
Yay. Yeah, my name's Sunday. I live in Yorkshire, and I love cycling, and what I enjoy doing is supporting especially mothers who have been excluded from their adult children's lives. So I'm a coach around that, relationship coach, and also do some work around grief and loss and change. So that's us. And we start off with a general question, and then the conversation just flows. So it was Janet who produced this lovely question for us. So this is the question we're going to be answering to as we kick off this conversation. And the question is, what is one way that you have grown or even thrived as a result of an abusive experience? And yeah, I invite Lorna to kick us off with this, Lorna, if you will.
Thank you, because I sort of touched on that in the introduction. That at the very first one we did, I said I was a holistic therapist. So that was one of them, coming into my own and healing my own holistic health. I ended up starting my own business, which I never ever thought that I would do, and helping others with their holistic health or their holistic wealth, whatever you want to call it. And then moving into this area now online of being a coach. Like when Lucy introduced herself, I was thinking she was Lucy extraordinaire with all her hats, and I'm like, yeah, I identify with that because I've got all these hats as well. And but it's sort of niche down now, if you like. So helping individuals who are in challenging relationships with an addict or an alcoholic, and they're helping in their loved one's recovery, and to help them not sacrifice their own dreams and aspirations so that they can regain control of their own life without feeling guilty, because that has been my journey through being involved in abusive relationships, by being the abused and the abuser. And yes, so being a businesswoman, and so I never thought I'd actually say that out loud, and especially in a public arena. So it's good to be able to say that now and not feel guilty either about worrying about maybe how it will come across to others, because that has been my journey. And if I can help anybody else with that and guide them, assist them back into their own empowerment, great. That's been one of my biggest ones. Yeah.
Lucy, do you want to weave into that?
Yeah. So the question was, what's the biggest gift? Sorry.
Yeah, it could be gift. The question was one where you have grown and thrived, even thrived as a result of your experience.
Yeah. So my experience, abuse, however one wants to define it, is it's a gift that keeps on giving, right? I think for me, it is being, because it's an ongoing journey, and I quite often fall off the wagon. I walk, it's like a tightrope walk, that the abuse can bring you back down, because it can, for me, it can like define who I am and my worth. But the how I can thrive through that is I have to really pick myself up and put myself back on that tightrope walk again. And when I manage to do that, that is so empowering, so empowering. And I think being in the healing therapies side of things, it really gives me a compassion for those who come to me with similar issues. I really know how they feel because I've been there. Yeah, I think it makes us far more compassionate once we can pull ourselves. I'll speak for myself. Once I can pull myself out of victimhood and self-pity, it's a little resort I visit quite often. Then I think it's a hugely empowering, and the forgiveness. I think learning forgiveness is massive. Forgiving myself, forgiving the so-called perpetrator, and that's for me, I think that's one of the biggest lessons and goals for my life. Yeah, and I just wanted to add that recently it's been brought to my attention again, the issues with highly sensitive people, and I would put myself in that category of highly sensitive. So what I would label abuse, others might label as just bad manners or poor behavior, but because I'm so hugely sensitive, it cuts me deep. So I think abuse is a very subjective term for all of us. Yeah.
Thanks, Luce.
Okay, I'll chip in now, Sundy, if that's all right. Yeah, I mean, all our lives are a journey and we have challenges along the way. And I was fortunate in having quite a good childhood, really. I knew I was loved, but my mum was quite controlling, and she did teach me how to comply with her quite a lot, which made me very much a people pleaser. And I didn't see that as abuse at the time, but it made me prime material for somebody who could abuse me, because I would not fight back. I would not speak up for myself. I didn't even know how to set boundaries or anything like that. So I was then in a long relationship, which a lot of it was really good, but the guy had a short temper, And when he couldn't cope with what was going on outside the family home, he came home and he let rip at me. It was always verbal, nothing more than that. But it was like name calling, you know, it made me feel awful, basically. And I took it for a long time for the sake of the family, to keep the home together. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to fight back. I eventually walked out because I didn't know what else to do. But that was the empowering moment for me, really, was to walk out. And by then I had a good profession. My kids were teenagers. 2 of them had left home. So I started finding myself, and there have been other instances along the way, but it's now in the last decade, if that, or less than that probably, that I've realized, oh, this has all been a journey towards knowing how to self-love, knowing how to respect myself, knowing how to not depend on others to be happy, to keep me happy, rather, you know, that and it's much easier. And I also did some work on myself in personal development courses, and that's when I realized, oh, like my first partner was not really mad at me. He was frustrated, he was worried, but he let it out on me. So I took it personally at the time, but you know, you can learn more compassion when you understand why people are abusive. I think that's been part of my growing wisdom too, I think. So yeah.
I love what you just said there. This growing compassion in people who are abusive, you know, and as for myself, as somebody who was abusive, you know, I would shout, I would yell, I would use physical force, because that's what I learned. And for some reason, you know, I'm always fascinated, like the likes of me who learned to fight, whereas perhaps you, Janet, sort of learned to do what you do, you know, the responses that we choose, you know, as a result of childhood stuff, you know, and living through all of that and then experiencing it myself, and then having really learning, as I learned compassion for myself, I learned compassion for other people, you know, and that allowed me, one of the best gifts for me from it all is this ability to see people in their program rather than in their greatness, you know, in their wholeness, in their divinity, if you like. And even because I recognize that in myself, you know, so, and it's really odd to think that I had to go through that to learn that. Maybe I could have learned it another way, I don't know. But also the gifts, you know, and we talked about it, calling it the gifts, and we realized that actually that perhaps wouldn't be the right title for this. This is sort of about thriving beyond our experience of being in abusive relationships. And, you know, for me, it was helpful in switching me on to who I was and how I did myself and how awful I was to other people, how unconscious I was to other people's sensitivities. You know, it was I was forging, you know, I was like, my masculine energy was like up front and center, my wounded masculine, if you want to call it that. And you talked about forgiveness, Lucy, you know, and I think that is just so crucial part of this, how to forgive ourselves, you know. And that phrase that gets bandied around in nobody's perfect. Well, actually we are. It's just that we've got all these layers of conditioning slapped on us, reactive, responsive coping strategies that made us either be abusive or receive abuse, or so it's really opened up my lots of cans of worms. And the biggest for me, one of the biggest gifts from this is that I've found other people who talk the same language and who are on a mission to wave this flag that is so difficult for a lot of people to talk about, because it was uncomfortable for us to do this. We've all said it, you know, and it's so thriving is going for me as me going beyond my fear, knowing that the stuff that I've collected over the years through my experiences being done to and doing to others harm, as I've got something to offer the world, you know. And if I keep it all quiet and shoved away and like, oh, we can't talk about abuse, I'm not helping the expansion of the human species, because it's everywhere. People getting cross and triggered, and and unless we talk about it, and yeah, I could go on, but has anybody got anything to feed into that?
Yeah, something just came to mind. It's about our self-worth, isn't it? I think, kind of bottom line. I mean, when we've experienced abuse, we can feel worthless. We can feel like shit. We must be horrible people, otherwise that person, that our mother, our father, whoever, our husband, wouldn't treat us like that. And that's such a massive thing to overcome, the feelings of worthlessness. And and as a human race, I think we've all got this kind of Stockholm syndrome that we love our abusers, our governments, our the system that controls us, and that's because we don't know who we really are, and we don't value who we really are. Because if we knew who we were on an individual level, if we knew who we really were, and we understood our worth, we wouldn't put up with it, right? We just wouldn't do it. But the problem is, when you're a child, you don't know that abusive parent is being abusive. You just take it that that's how it is. That's how it is. Your parent's perfect, right? So you have to make yourself the wrong one. So yeah, it's a huge thing, actually. It's a big gift. Thank you.
It seems a very inelegant path to self-love, doesn't it? And self-worth.
It seems a what?
A very inelegant, but then the human race, it does seem very inelegant, doesn't it? It seems all messy, and it's not particularly, but it does seem to me that if you make it through, there is this path to self-love, which Janet mentioned, and then a self-worthiness.
Yeah.
It's like the magic is in that messy middle somewhere. Isn't it? The magic is in that messy middle. Because I know that for myself, I came into like a fun-filled, vibrant, carefree existence, but I became this highly functional individual, like you said, Lucy, highly sensitive. I identified as one of the highly sensitives. I came into this sort of large family, experiencing lots and lots of love, but unbeknown to me at that time, there's also this like unconscious, sneaky, delusional, shadowy undercurrent of masking this truth that was called alcoholism, traveling alongside that. So I didn't know that until I started attracting others that were like these emotional cripple. I mean, for me personally, I was inside me. I was this emotional cripple. Society and my peers and my guides couldn't guide me with my highly sensitive emotional aspect, because it was pretty unknown then. It wasn't really talked about. It was just like, stop that crying, and drama queen, and but that was the impression I felt around me a lot of the time. So I was thinking about this the other day, that a lot of the time I learned to laugh about myself and became, now let me get this right, because I can never say this properly, self-deprecating. Yes, I said it without stuttering. I became self-deprecating, and I would laugh and make fun of myself to a horrible place of unworthiness before somebody else could, because the name calling of being this child, especially in school, and the boys would grab my hair and go, come on, horse, giddy up. And because I was such a big child at that time, I hated it with a passion. And I'd run home and be told, sticks and stones break your bones. Names will never harm you. So, okay, I'll just call myself names first, and then it won't hurt so much. But actually, it was building up these layers within me where I became this emotional cripple. And I mean, for those that don't know this story, in my 30s, I actually did become a physical cripple by attracting the abusers to me in the form of relationships with men. that could strengthen my own inner unworthiness and devaluing myself and lack of self-respect by with their abusive attitude. And unlike you, Janet, I learned to shout a lot and be louder than everybody else, and had a bit of a nickname as a foghorn, loud Lorna. And you know, because I was big, I could stand up like this and go. Inside, I was this cripple with a knot in my gut that was just killing me, yet didn't look like that outside because of what was coming out of my mouth. I never had a fight, a physical fight in my life, because I learned how to use this. And I would threaten with it. But so, you know, we know the expression hurt people. And then, but healed people can heal people as well. And I feel that's a gift that all of us share with our chosen, like what we choose to do now, what we're doing here right now. I feel that we've got that wise, wonderful wisdom to share, that hopefully somebody, we don't know, we have no idea who's going to listen to this in the future on the replay. You know, we did decide that somebody talking of abuse, I've never said this out loud, but at the age of 19, and none of my family know this, and Lucy, you've been my inspiration for this, and I'm feeling my hands are going like this, even thinking about saying it out loud, but I was gang raped. And through that, you know, somebody that might be listening to this right now, if somebody's just experienced that, anybody's experienced it, could be male or female, to say that there's a gift from that, we did not to hear that right now. Nobody could tell me then that there's any gift from that place at that time. So that's why I asked if we could change the title about gifts of abuse to a beautiful thriving beyond it, because, and I know a lot of people don't like the word hope, but if I hadn't had hope, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And there's always hope. So, you know, and we're, you know, in our limitations, we're human, yet we're so much more than that. We are so much more than that. Anyway, I'm going to stop waffling. Somebody else.
Yeah, thank you. That was beautiful sharing that, and thank you for that tender bit. You got anything?
It does seem,
Yeah, go on, Janet.
I'm just going to say, it does seem to be rife right through society that nobody truly values their worth properly, you know, I mean, and self-love. And I think you've got to be a bit discerning about self-love, because you can be egotistical loving the self, but that's not what we mean, is it? That's not being bombastic, not pretending to be great or whatever, but self-love is completely different to that, and compassion for ourselves and knowing our self-worth and learning to be our best friend. Like, often we don't say to ourselves compassionate things that we would say to a best friend in the same situation, you know. But I loved what Lucy said too about, you know, we've all got a divine core. I think, Sundy, you said a bit about it too. We've all got a divine core, and I think if we can speak to that, even to the abuser, like, you can't, not condoning what they do, but it's like setting our boundaries. No, that's definitely a no, but I know that's not who you really are. You're struggling with something, or you wouldn't be like that, you know. And I think if we have that in our mind, it can help, you know.
I found it, for me, I'm really grateful, because the family that I was raised in, it was all shouting, hitting, and primarily that was my dad, you know, and my dad, I think, was the one that sowed the seed for the healing that I then picked up the banner. I'm sure other family members have, it's just that I'm the one that's talking about it and visible in that realm. And I remember him saying, and I might have said this in a previous one, that when he said to me, only on one occasion did he say to me, you know, Sunday, when I start to get cross, just sort of talk to me about it. And he would be in his sort of mid-60s, probably my age, you know, when he was still laying into everybody when he was upset. And I listened to that, and the sort of teenage child that I was then, I thought, oh, bloody way, I'm saying anything to you when you're stoking up your fury, because I'll just get it even worse. But it really did land in me, and I remember that. You know, he obviously was aware that the way that he was behaving wasn't right, and yet he felt so powerless to change that aspect. And I remember that as a young mother, that there was something in me that sort of the animal part, the fear part, whatever, wherever it lives, amygdala, whatever, that natural human animal part of us that makes us react. And that was really where I was coming from. And so through my dad, I remembered, and I started to unpick and started to look at myself, and all those things that we've mentioned, the lovely gifts that we have inside of us, the forgiveness, the compassion, the love, the self-worth, all seem to sort of like bubble up all at the same time, in sort of this inner wrestling of me being still in this animal part of me, and noticing people who were very in their victim, and seeing that I could actually goad them. I could see the cracks in their boundaries, and giving myself such, I hated myself. You know, I don't know what you said, Lorna, you said something about yourself, that you self-deprecated a lot. I did that, but I also had this hair shirt. I remember feeling like I'd got this sack on my skin. So there were all these messages of something's not right, something needs to change. And the amount of like self-abuse that I did, you know, like in terms of talking to myself and giving myself a hard time for who I was and how I was punishment enough for anything else that I've ever experienced. So in terms of thriving through my experience, you know, it's funny, isn't it? It's like we've got these individual paths, and this was obviously my path. And it's now I can see other people on a similar path, you know, that they're short-tempered, fly off the handle, have got a mouth like, you know, just fast and furious. I too had a nickname. I was Gobby Gilchrist at school. Don't know why I got that name. You don't need to laugh. And so yeah, so this journey of unfolding into this, I had to learn how to be kind, you know, and in a way that's a really lovely thing to learn, isn't it? It's like having to explore what kindness is, what consideration for others is.
Mm.
You know, and another would have been ashamed of saying that those things were lacking in me when I was younger, and they were. You know, they just were. And so I can see it in other people, and I think, yeah, that's, you know, that's a version of me coming through. And there's a space along your path where you can get to, and this is where I love it, what the work that I do, that I can invite people into that space, and we can sort of giggle about it a bit, take it out of its like drama and its disaster, and aren't I a horrible person to be like this, and why can I not stop doing things like this, and make it into sort of like debunking the ego with a bit of lightness and a bit of playfulness and a bit of joy and fun in it, which sounds odd, because what could be funny about wanting to punch somebody when you're angry? You know, it's a bit, yeah, anyway. Humor helps a lot, I think, or lightness, maybe not humor, lightness helps a lot in this debunking of these patterns that we've got. Anybody else got anything around how it's
Morning,
helped you to
this
thrive?
morning, even
Yeah.
like something sparked me. I don't use the word triggered so much now, but I suppose it was quite a big trigger for me this morning. And you're talking about lightness within what, an hour and a half, going out in nature and having a walk, recognizing through the journey that you're talking about giving yourself the self-abuse. You know, that's worse than anything. And even just now, while we've been sitting talking, I've started that again by what I just shared. And I'm aware of it. And I've got my stomach's in knots again. And this morning, the same thing happened. And it's like, I know it'll shift and it'll move through me. And it will come back round to humor, because it always does. And that's where the self-deprecating and that line, am I self-deprecating or am I covering it up with humor instead of feeling that? Because if not, my mind will make up a story about it, and it could go on for days, and then it'll end up in depression or something dark, and then how do you bring that lightness back in? How do we bring it back in? Well, I go out walking, and I will speak to somebody that I can speak it out to, and then eventually end up laughing about something that it's like the human, like you say, debunking the ego, because the ego wants to grasp onto that and hold on to it and put me into that victim place and hold on to that instead of just letting go, because it was never easy for me to let go. It was easier for me to cling on and grasp onto it because it was familiar. So yeah.
I've got a question that's up, and maybe one of us could answer to this. You know, what's been the key component of you that's supported you in moving through your experience of abuse? What has been some of the things that have enabled you to free yourself up from this old pattern?
I thought I could fix everything just by being loving, and it didn't work because I was not being loving to me. You know, I was still being kind of soft and loving, and that didn't work. And it took me a long time to realize that. But I wanted to mention something else. Because I was no good at expressing myself or standing up to anyone else, I would close myself off. And, you know, there's this saying, hurt people hurt people. So when I was hurt, I would hurt others without realizing it, just by shutting myself off completely, you know, stonewalling. I had a taste of that from somebody else later on and realized what it was like. But it's another form of abuse, really, is to not give yourself, the whole of yourself, to someone else, not be authentic, not be able, not, you know, if you can't, you can't. And I couldn't at the time authentically communicate, you know. And my mum was very much like that. So she never lost her temper, but you could cut the air with a knife when she was not amused, when she was cross. You didn't need to say anything. It was just a look. But, you know, at the same time, she controlled that way. So that's another form of abuse, really. Has anyone else experienced that, I wonder?
Oh yeah.
Well, my ex-husband was like that. He would just shut off, wouldn't speak. And so for somebody that's gobby like me, that was difficult, because I would want to talk to somebody about, let's talk about this, and I can see now and have that compassion deeply for him, because you know, I can see his journey. Yet, like somebody's question as well, it was support from others, because other people had to love me before I could learn to love myself. And so I needed a lot of support in that journey. And yeah, and then that, like you're talking there, Jana, it's like the unacceptable becomes acceptable in relationships, because like I am a champion for change, and we were talking about change the other day, and everybody's up in arms about, we were all up in arms about mobile phones. Oh, I'm not using that. I'm never going to use a mobile phone. And yet, you know, I think of my mum now, and she was phoning the other day going, my God, I feel like I've lost a limb since I haven't got the mobile. That's so weird. And it's true, because we become settled on. We're creatures of habit as well. We make that change eventually, especially if we're moving together as a society. We can become, and then that unacceptable becomes acceptable. But I don't think that's happening anymore in our collective fields, because we're waking up a little bit more to all that, and we're waking up to the abuse of our leaders and everything else as well. So we're learning now to lead ourselves by coming together. Does that make sense? So it's the more that we we can lead ourselves into that compassion and gentleness. Gentleness is the one for me. It's learning that, and patience as well. Learning patience, learning gentleness by doing my own inquiry, by contemplating life. And then I had to grow in that compassion and grow through being in that 12-step program and learning about this family disruption. It's not where alcohol is concerned, but it's just a symptom of something that's much deeper. And these things we take to some of us to numb out those feelings, whatever way it is, Janet, isn't it? It's like we either shut down, or we either react or we replace, or both even. It's that imploding, exploding. I used to implode first and then I'd explode. So so even under my reactions, there could be something repressed under there that I have to dig deep to find it. Okay.
You're welcome.
If I can answer your question a little bit more, Sunday, you said about what one component. The thing that changed for me was when I realized I have permission to do what I want, and it doesn't matter if I upset other people, because my mother taught me again, don't upset anybody, don't rock the apple cart, whatever. So I never did with my husband when he lost his temper, but I knew he'd kind of blow his top if I left. But I went on a personal development course, and that's where I learned, it's okay to upset people. They choose how they respond to you, but you've got to do what feels right for you, And that was a huge shift for me.
Yeah. I think we had a conversation not so long ago on one of the synergy calls around being in fear of upsetting other people. And then somebody saying, well, everybody's responsible for their own responses.
Mm.
And then how arrogant it is for people like me who think that I have the power to upset anybody. Well, am I some sort of, and it's something that I still wrestle with. This, how much power do I have? Because I recognize that this is really interesting, because my coping strategy for when I was being abused would be that I would have the intention, and I learned this, I did a little bit of regression stuff and discovered that my first thoughts were, well, when you do that to me, I'm going to make it so that you feel really bad about yourself. And that was my childhood coping strategy. So I would actually almost invite, if I wanted to get some revenge, I would invite in inverted commas, somebody to hit me, because I knew that they'd feel shit after they'd done it. And, it's like the psychology behind that. And I must have learned that when I was like 2, 3, 4, because I kind of remember it in this regression that I did. And that blew me away when I realized, and I wasn't until I was in my 50s that I realized that I had that as a coping strategy. That if you hurt me, you're going to feel worse than me. So if I want a bit of revenge, bring it on.
Don't mess with Sunday.
And I just think, how the heck did all those dots get joined up? And I can still feel that pulling me, and because it never really goes away. It's sort of like always work in progress, I think, isn't it? Dealing with, and I recognize, like Janet, yours is the opposite side of me. And I think Lorna and I are a bit similar. I'm not sure about Lucy. Maybe you've got both. But it just fascinates me, because it does seem to me that we do seem to attract. So bullies attract people who are easy to bully, and people who are easy to bully seem to attract bullies. And I think that is the sort of like the universe sort of, I won't say laughing at us, but putting us together so that we can grow, so that we get the information on a day-to-day basis that on how to expand beyond our childhood pickups, and I just so get it that's a little bit, in my world, that's how I make sense of it. I don't know if anybody wants to follow on with that bit.
Yeah, I'll follow on with that, because from my work as a regression therapist and past life regression therapist, it is nearly, 9.9 times out of 10, our abusers are in the soul realms are actually our best friends. And they volunteer to play that role for us so that we can grow. And it's the soul chooses its parents, its family, its character, its physical character, its mental characteristics, its gender, the themes of life. These are all pre-chosen to give the soul the best opportunity to learn these things and to grow. So, that's really the hugest gift of abuse. The gift is always in the darkness. It's always in the worst thing, the most difficult thing in your life. That is where the most beautiful gift is for each and every one of us. It's like we have to dive into that dark, nasty, stinky, terrifying, shameful horribleness about ourselves to find the treasure. That's where the treasure is, because we set it up that way. And I must look back at this recording to remind myself when I'm lost in darkness again.
I don't want to go into politics, and I am going to tell you somebody who's political. And I once heard, and I don't know whether I read it or heard it, that Donald Trump actually once said he'd never looked under his own lid because he reckoned he wouldn't like what he found there. So that would sort of substantiate that a lot of us kind of know something about ourselves, and it takes a massive courage to go look under that lid, to pull that creaky door open and go inside and have a look at the shadow stuff that we've all got. You know,
said 95% of people will not do that.
Is that the figure?
I've heard
How many?
I have heard that 95% of people will not do that. But then again, I feel with what Lucy's just shared, that the 5% that do, it has a ripple effect. So I suspect that'll have dropped by now quite substantially, because of the 5% that do the work.
Yeah.
It does ripple out, because Nikola Tesla said it, thinking, vibration, frequency, and energy. And if we're talking about the law of attraction, that's not the primary thing, the law of attraction. The primary one's the law of vibration. So if we're vibrationally beings, we're getting into sort of waters that maybe a bit deep for some people.
But it only takes one person. I mean, that Me Too thing really did sort of like the wave of Me Too. You only have to say Me Too, and all the other people go, "Oh gosh, yeah, Me Too." And yeah.
When we're talking about like frequencies and souls, and we go into those conversations, it sets you off on a different trajectory completely.
It does. And I think that's what the thriving around it is, that it's opened up so much more of what humans are for us. That's definitely for me. It's like, well, anything's possible, Well,
that's right. We are, like you said earlier on, both of you, it's like Lucy said, you're a soul. So we are souls with that divinity, that core divinity, and it's about marrying the two together for me. And never mind your masculine, feminine. It's both being a divine human. And how do I want to walk as a divine human in this earth? Well, by coming through that darkness and digging through all the shit of the day, through that slice of suffering, whatever that slice of suffering is, like you say, Lucy, in this lifetime, I'm bringing all those other people into, and then forgiving them and thanking them and being in gratitude to them, that through that other side of that shit, and come up smelling of roses, hopefully. Because we need manure, don't we, for the garden, to cultivate it and nourish it along with other things.
So many analogies, aren't there? And we've got some comments that are coming through that Steffi's.
I forgot that we're live on Facebook.
That's okay. So we've got a comment from Christina. I'm working from the bottom up that says, "Hi, glad I'm joined. Glad to hear your sharings. So I feel I'm not alone doing certain things like hurting without realizing the other bits." So it's like that thing, like I was saying, once somebody says, "Oh, this happened," this is like, well, what I was. Was it harder for me to say my dad used to hit me, or for me to say that I used to hit others? And it was probably the hardest thing my creepy, quaky tummy was saying is that, I used to hit my kids, and I'm sure that I'm not alone in that. And yet I feel so alone in it because it's so not of its time now. It's, it's history, isn't it? Another comment from FC Heaps, I think. I can't summarize this. And just the years of therapy to uproot the psychological trauma. So many of us go into loads of therapy and looking, don't we?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then Helen, a lady called Helen, has said that many how wondering how many women were left to cry as babies.
Mm.
And because that was of its time, wasn't it? Don't cry because they'll be spoiled, and all that. And she did say to her mum, and her mum said that she regretted it, and it was advice from the professionals at that time. And you can see how that sort of set up this lack of self-worth. If nobody's going to come when I cry, like it's going to join the dots up that you're not worthy.
There's a brilliant experiment, you can find it on YouTube, where they do with a baby and a mother, and how the mother's interacting with this baby who obviously can't speak at this point, and interacting, and you can see that it's like that non-verbal communication going on, and then it's called poker face something or other. It's a poker face study, and the mother sits like this, just staring at the baby, and then the baby's still trying to get the attention of the mother and starts getting it's horrible to watch. If you want to watch it, it does start pulling at your heartstrings watching it. And eventually the mother has enough and goes back to the baby, but it was an experiment that was done. It's interesting that, because this baby's just a little baby, I don't know how old it is, but yeah, it's interesting.
Something I've noticed with the groups of women that I'm working with who've stepped out of their abusive relationships, so they've found the power to get out of that, but they're still like dealing with what the hell happened. When they all come together as a group, maybe half a dozen or more, it's such a relief for them to hear each other's experiences, and that's part of the magic. Like Sunday, you were saying, the more we speak about it, the better. And they help each other grow, as well as they're on a structured program, but they've all felt like, oh, I'm alone, and some of them, if it's been their first relationship, just think, oh, this is normal life, until somebody says, hey, you should get out of that. So yeah, definitely it should be talked and talked and talked about.
Yeah.
And it also, the thing about getting stuck in the victim of it all. Some people don't get out of the story and keep repeating the story, because when you share, you need somebody who can hold space and like be in this neutral, validating, and yet not condoning, not enabling you to.
Yeah.
The listening of the story is equally as important as the sharing, because otherwise people get shoved down particular coping strategy routes. And there's that thing about taking responsibility and taking the blame, all that comes in, the language around all of this, that's really something that I've extended into, and there's so many more labels these days. And in the good old days, it was just, they were less emotive. They seem to be anyway. Now we've got narcissistic and all these different labels that just get thrown around. And what do you think to the labeling that's going on around it all?
Yeah, it's in my opinion, it's gone a little bit too far. It's like we're getting hung up on the labels and not actually what's under the labels. It's in a way, it's a convenience. as well, to kind of label a set of symptoms as this is what it is. But it can also be misleading as well. But at least if you say, I am codependent, or she was a covert narcissist, we kind of know what, now we know what we're dealing with, we're talking about. But I've noticed that, like, our adult children, that generation, they love these labels. They love these labels, and it's just it's almost kind of like red herring. It's like it's a distraction. But I just wanted to add to the conversation that in 2014, when I was, how old was I? 48.
You were 10 years younger than you are now.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, it was March. It was about now in 2014. I undertook what turned out to be 60 weeks of therapy, weekly sessions, hour a week. And because I had reached the point at age 48 where I did not know what to do, where to go, or what was going on. I had been in such a series of abusive relationships that, and it culminated in a huge row with the ex-boyfriend, that I thought the bottom of my world had fallen out, and I just didn't know what to do. And I happened to come across a note, some notes I'd taken from a tarot card reading a few years earlier in a book. And I read them, and the tarot card reader had said to me, if you're going to go and live back with your mother, stay with your mother, you're going to need to go to CODA meetings, Codependence Anonymous. I didn't know what that was then, but I came across this note and I read it at that moment, and suddenly all the bells started ringing, like, oh shit, I need some help. I need some professional help, because I can't deal with this. I don't know what to do now. I'm 48. It's like everything's shit. I want to die. I don't want to be me anymore. I don't want to live anymore. So I found myself a therapist, and thank God they were doing it by Zoom in those days. They started doing it by Zoom. And that was such a huge gift that I gave myself I made that my priority for myself, was to continue with that therapy for 1 hour a week for 60 weeks, changed my life. And I had to learn, thanks to the really amazing therapist, I had to learn actually some behaviors that I had accepted in the past were really abusive. I didn't know. I didn't know. I mean, there was part of me that did know, but I analyzed and I reasoned with myself, and I made me the wrong person, which actually they were fucking out of order. Excuse my language.
Oh.
You know, and and you know, the last 10 years, I'm still learning where the boundaries are. I'm still learning, but I would say to anyone watching this who recognizes himself in that, really, and a professional therapist to help disentangle these complicated relationships that we've had. I had to go through everything from birth, childhood, school, marriage, divorce, the whole lot, and even ongoing things during the therapy. You know, someone would behave in a way which was like left me devastated, and I'd have to tell her, and she'd help me to sort it out. And I go, oh yeah, it was really out of order of her, wasn't it? Like, I'm okay, actually. and this is, I think that was a huge gift for me to have that that therapy, and it kind of set me up to thrive in the rest of my life. I mean, it's still an ongoing, it's a work in progress, but that was the best thing I think I've done in my life, was that therapy.
Oh, thank you, Lucy.
I was in the 12-step program for friends and relatives of alcoholics, but I also had to get extra help as well with a therapist and a coach. So even though the 12-step principles, the 12 steps are not a therapy. You know, alcoholism is not induced by alcohol. So, you know, CODA, we didn't have CODA at the time here, so it was friends and relatives of alcoholics I went to. But again, I still needed that extra So yeah, I love your sharing there. It helped me as well. Because I had come to that point. Well,
Mm.
yeah. Mhm.
I had some CBT and somebody pretended to be one of my relatives. And after she'd done the little bit, I was sort of pressed up against the wall like this. And she said, "You have nothing in your tin to reply to me, have you?" I said, "No." So she said, "That's what we're going to work on, some responses." And it was great because then the first time I ever said to somebody strongly and firmly, "I don't like the way you treat me," every little cell in my body went, "Oh, this is different." And I could feel it on a cellular level. I could feel the dewiring, the deconstructing, the rewiring, the reconstructing had started. I was losing the old patterns and gaining the new skills. And all it took for me was to learn some new words and the courage in somewhere inside of me to spit them out of my mouth.
Mm. In the moment, not
Yes.
later when you go, hang on a minute.
Well, it did work. It did work though. I could ring up and say, I could speak up. What happened, that didn't work for me. And it's something as simple as that. Because all your frequency changes, your vibration changes, you become more competent. And, there is the old patterns were just the old patterns. But like you say, Lucy, you have to sort of learn, don't you, that actually you were being treated abusively.
Mm.
While you're hurting, you're healing at the same time. That's what
Yeah.
I'm hearing from that. Yeah.
Well, we've come to the end, and this has been so lovely. And before we go into some sort of like closing comments, I'd just like to let you know, if you're watching, thank you for watching us and your comments. And I think I got a few, but not everybody's. But you'll be able to catch this recording in the Silver Tent, and also it will get uploaded onto the Silver Tent YouTube channel. So if you want to visit that, there's a host of other conversations and interviews on the Silver Tent TV channel. So, tune into that. And I think maybe I just ask us all what we're taking away from this for ourselves. What's been the gift of this conversation to you?
Well, I guess we're all looking at there's good life beyond abuse, and for the women who might not be quite there yet, men too, open yourselves up, find a help, find whatever you can to get through it, because you can get through it.
Yeah, thanks, Janet.
Yeah, ditto what Janet says. And the strength in the it's a paradox, but the strength in sharing our vulnerabilities.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. I think I'm taking away the fact that the four of us are pretty amazing, and I know we're not alone, and I know that there's a lot of other champions for change rocking around talking about these top topics, and I feel very blessed to be part of that crew.
Cosmic karmic cleanup crew.
Okay, anything else? We're going. Love you lots. See you again on the next one. Bye-bye.